Chris, there's so much breaking news to analyze. Let's get right to it. We want to bring in Tom Fuentes. He's our CNN law enforcement analyst and former FBI assistant director, and David Gartenstein-Ross, senior fellow for the Foundation of Defense of Democracies. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. Tom, let me start with you. Let's just talk about what we know now about Jihadi John. This seems as though it's a big investigative coup that investigators have now figured out that he is actually Mohammed Emwazi. He grew up in West London. How would they have gone about piecing together his identity?
Well, I think that they probably were able to find people in London that knew him, knew of his travel there and his intention to join ISIS, and eventually revealed that to the authorities in London.
David, here are some things that we know. The BBC and Washington Post are reporting his real identity, and they've done the background research into who exactly he is. He is a Brit. He is allegedly from a well-to-do family. He grew up in West London. He graduated from college. He graduated with a degree in computer programming. Does this fit the mold of what we think about ISIS fighters, or does it break the mold?
There's various molds. I wouldn't say that you have a single demographic, and the information that's come out about these guys has been only a fraction of the whole. If you look at the foreign fighters who've gone over, there's over 20,000 foreign fighters. About 4,000 of them are from Western countries. About 16,000 are from the Arab world. And the amount of geographic or biographical information we have is really just a fraction of that. But in terms of previous jihadi profiles, this does fit the mold in certain ways. Terrorist groups in general, not just jihadist groups, tend to recruit from people who, or tend to be comprised of people who are of higher socioeconomic status than the norm, people who are more well-educated than the norm. There's, the IRA is an exception. It was composed of people who were of lower socioeconomic status. But in general, terrorism, rather than insurgency, tends to be a profession of the elites.
Tom, until this moment, he had been called Jihadi John because no one knew his identity. And the first time that he came to be seen in the public view was during James Foley's execution and beheading. Since then, this same man with the same build, with this same accent, was seen in other gruesome beheading videos. Tom, how significant is it that authorities now know his identity?
Well, it's significant in terms of being able to identify other people that may be, his friends or classmates, other individuals that know him and may be inspired by him to go over and do the same thing. And I think that that's probably how they caught up with him and identified him, is through his network of friends back in London and people that he may have stayed in communication with or thought he was being clever enough as a computer programmer to be able to have discreet communications with, that eventually gave him up. So I think that it's very important to identify who else might be involved with him.
David, this is breaking news, so I'm just reading some of these details along with you at this moment. So he was not born in London. He was perhaps raised there, and he lived in West London. However, he was Kuwaiti born. It says here he's in his mid-20s. He appears to have left little trail on social media or elsewhere online. Those who knew him say he was polite. He had a penchant for wearing stylish clothes. While adhering to the tenets of his Islamic faith, he had a beard and was mindful of making eye contact with women. What does all of that tell you, David?
There's a few different things. I mean, number one, the lack of a social media trail indicates that he may have radicalized quite a bit earlier. Oftentimes, when someone is radicalizing, fairly close to the time of trying to either go over to Syria or carry out a terrorist attack, they have a social media trail where you can see development of their thoughts. That's been one of the very interesting things about recent terrorist cases, because 10 years ago, say, when I was studying these issues, it was really the exception when someone would have a trail like that. Sometimes they would have a blog, but now almost everyone has a social media trail. A second thing that's interesting about that, look, there's a debate that's been reopened by Graham Wood's article in The Atlantic about, do ISIS guys really believe in the religious ideas? There's some indications in there that religiosity was important to him, but look, I think that we'll learn a bit more as more biographical information trickles out. As you said, this is really breaking right now, and we're starting to get just the first details, and I think we'll have a much more comprehensive biographical sketch of this guy by later on today or tomorrow.
Here's one more interesting tidbit, Tom. And again, this is courtesy of the Washington Post that has done this reporting. They spoke to friends of his. The friends who spoke on condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the investigation believe that Mwazi, that is his real name, started to radicalize after a planned safari in Tanzania and following his graduation from the University of Westminster. Tanzania, that's not a place that we think of as a hotbed, is it?
Oh, absolutely. Al-Qaeda has been up and down Africa for, for more than a decade. We had the U.S. Embassy bombings in August of 1998, and the FBI sent several hundred agents to East Africa. That investigation went from Somalia down to South Africa. So the U.S. Embassy being one of the places bombed, Dar es Salaam in Tanzania.
David, let's switch right now to the other breaking news, which is that these 3 suspects were arrested in Brooklyn as they were trying to join ISIS. These guys are also fascinating. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, living and working in Brooklyn. Tell us more that you've learned about this investigation here at home.
Well, there's a few things that are interesting about it. I mean, the most interesting is you generally don't have the interactions that occurred in this case with the FBI. I mean, as the report prior to this interview said, they went to one of the defendants in this case and asked him about his social media postings, and he admitted to them that he wanted to kill the president. He admitted that he was a supporter of ISIS. And look, he was basically caught red-handed, but generally people will make up some sort of excuse. So it's interesting that he came outright and admitted all of that. It's interesting that they were able to get a confidential informant into the group after he had admitted to the FBI that he wanted to kill the president and was an ISIS supporter. This indicates some poor operational security on their part, and the fact that they were so eager to get in with ISIS and spread ISIS's ideas that they trusted someone who was unfamiliar and ultimately helped to provide the FBI some information that gave them authority, for example, to undertake wiretaps and other such things.
It is fascinating to read this 23-page complaint from the FBI on these guys. David Gartenstein-Ross, Tom Fuentes, thanks so much for helping us walk through all of this. We'll have much more on all of this breaking news throughout the program.